We're back with another episode of Ask the Edmonds Cop and Sergeant Shane Hawley. It's been a while since we've done some segments. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to talk about something that's been in the news, so to speak, for a while, but people may still have questions about, and that is Edmonds Police Department is now handling all of the police work for the Town of Woodway. So tell me more about that.
I always do that too.
I know. Is it a city? Is it a town?
It's a township, is my understanding.
Okay, so. Very good.
Yeah, so this took place January 1. Stroke of midnight, we flipped the switch, and then we ended up taking over police services for them. City of Edmonds and the Town of Woodway have a contract. Interestingly enough, Woodway, and we've talked about Woodway before, how does it work, how do police services work in the town itself. They had a police department. They still are actually keeping a police department, kind of a real scaled back version of it. They'll have a chief and 4 officers, and they'll do selective traffic enforcement, maybe some house checks, that sort of stuff. But for any other police-related matter, so if any call comes in, we will deal with it with a few exceptions.
Okay. So what is the actual difference between what was happening before, when I know Edmonds still did have a contract, but it was not as thorough as, thorough is probably the wrong word, but extensive as what you're doing now?
So before, what would happen is if a call came in and there was a Woodway officer on, then they would be dispatched to it and handle it. If they needed another unit to back them, because it was a 2-officer call or more, then we would respond in as assisting officers per mutual aid. Okay, we do that all over the place.
Yeah.
Okay. If there was no Woodway officer working, we would get the call, and depending on what it is, if it needed additional investigation, there was an arrest to be made or whatever, a Woodway officer would actually be called in, even if it was time off for them, to handle the call.
Right.
Now we handle all of it.
Okay.
It actually kind of flips. So even if there's a Woodway officer on, we are the primary responding agency for all Woodway-related matters.
Got it. Okay. And I suppose something I've heard about, the question that Edmonds residents have about this is, how does it affect, if it does in any way, the response that Edmonds people will have? In other words, is it taking resources away from Edmonds Police Department to respond to Woodway?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The contract basically afforded us the opportunity to hire another officer, so it added an additional officer position. And when you look at the total number of calls for the Town of Woodway, it's less than 1 per day. So, and a large majority of those require little time on our part, a lot of alarm calls or that sort of things, and we think it will actually make less work for us than more work in the long run, because anytime we responded into the Town of Woodway, we would actually write a police report. That was done for billing purposes, because the City of Edmonds would bill the Town of Woodway after a certain number of calls, or if it took more time. So there was a lot of accounting and bookkeeping that had to be done, and record keeping for all that sort of stuff. Now we're not going to do that. We handle calls in Woodway exactly as we handle calls in Edmonds. So if it's a false alarm call, the officer doesn't actually have to write a police report. So we think it'll actually free up time as far as that goes from those Woodway calls.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think you mentioned this concept of mutual aid, which I think sometimes people don't really understand, that really we're sort of regional anyway. Everybody's kind of helping everybody else out when need be, right?
Oh yeah, it depends on what it is. I mean, it goes always around.
Right.
If Mount Lake Terrace has something really big going on and they're just overwhelmed by it, we'll send resources that we can. Same with Linwood. I mean, big events we've had recently have been, county-wide calls. We've had people from Marysville responding down here for some of these things. So, the patch says police or sheriff, you're wearing a badge and carrying a gun, we just want to make sure that all communities are safe and the officers responding to them, that we have enough backup and everybody's safe.
Okay. And then one other question, I think, is for Woodway residents, if the Edmonds police have an emergency, non-emergency number, et cetera, if Woodway resident has a non-emergency question, would they use that same number that we've been using for Edmonds?
Okay, so yeah, so if you need a police response, you would dial the exact same
911.
number. Yep, that will be the same. 911, you still get a police response.
Right.
Instead of Woodway, it's us now. Non-emergency, the exact same thing. Nothing changes with their fire service.
Okay.
That's the same across
Right.
the board. The only things we will not cover, and this is contractual, was animal control, unless it's a emergent situation. Dog is running around and clearly dangerous to the public at large, and code enforcement.
Okay.
So
those things are handled
yeah,
by
parking,
by
code
Woodway
enforcement
itself.
stuff. So yeah, we don't deal
Okay.
with those. And Woodway doesn't actually have very many city codes,
Right.
so there's really not a lot to enforce.
Right. Okay. Good. Thanks. Anything else I didn't ask?
No, I think that's about it. We're excited about it. It's really, I think, kind of cleans up some of the stuff. It was kind of cumbersome before, and I think this is real good win-win for both sides.
Okay. Very good. Thanks
Yeah,
very much.
you're welcome.
We'll be back soon with another episode of Ask the Edmonds Cop.